Sunday, September 18th, 2016, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. Great to be back with you this morning. In fact, great to be back was kind of the theme of the week as the third annual Detroit Homecoming was held this week. It is a pretty brilliant idea as the folks at Crane's Detroit Business send out invites to a prestigious group of native Detroiters and expats who've gone forth and prospered. You know, people like Steve Ballmer from Microsoft, Broadway producer Jeffrey Seller, who, by the way, announced that the musical Hamilton will be coming to Detroit as it takes to the road. You know, we learned a lot this week. Ballmer says he's going to earmark some of his considerable fortune for fighting poverty in Detroit. Shinola and Dan Gilbert are teaming up on a hotel on Woodward Avenue. Olympia's Tom Wilson says the preliminary talks are now getting underway on bringing the Detroit Pistons back downtown, and that's just a small slice, so the guests all head home with plenty to think about. There was also a good bit of talk about education in those sessions in Detroit. We've been thinking a lot about it too, and in fact Local 4 is adopting a Detroit school. We're going to talk about that a little later on. But first, there was more Michigan focus in the presidential race this week and some more email hacks. Should we be reading those? Is it all fair game? It's all this morning on Flashpoint. I got a lot we want to get to this morning, so let's dig right in. Stephen Henderson is here. He's the editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press. Ron Fournier, a very familiar name on the national scene as a political reporter and now back in his hometown as associate publisher now of Crane's Detroit. We'll talk about a homecoming for you, Ron. Good to have you here. Lena Epstein is the co-chair of the Donald Trump campaign in Michigan. Lena, good to have you back with us again.
Thank you for having me.
And Nolan Finley, the editorial page editor of the Detroit News. Nolan, good to have you here as well. Ron, I'd like to start with you because we'll dig into politics in a second, but I really have thought over these past 3 years that this homecoming event is a fascinating one. What was the takeaway, did you think, this week?
I think there's a lot of people like myself who had left the city quite a long time ago who want to come back and reconnect with it and maybe even come back and stay. I met 3 or 4 other expats who are now living here, and it's what brought me back. My wife and I decided to come back a couple of years ago, but it was all the networking that I was able to do, really starting at the first 2 homecomings, that got me connected in with Mary Kramer and the folks at Crane.
Interesting. And you've been, of course, in Washington these years covering all the great stories. Detroit has become
about 120 years I've been in Washington.
Yeah.
I came in with this Lincoln second.
Do you age like a president?
Yeah, I do exactly.
Yeah. Great stuff. Well, really great week, I thought. All right, let's talk a little bit of politics. Lena, I'd like to start with you. Donald Trump had another interesting week in Michigan. He was in Flint this past week, and his second attempt that got an awful lot of attention to kind of reach out to African-American voters. And I'm wondering if you believe he's getting what he wants out of this, or is it backfiring a little bit? He kind of had a little run-in with the pastor up in Flint this past week.
I think that he is getting what he wants out of this. I don't think he's expecting a wonderful greeting every time he approaches the Black community. I think he's prepared to face adversity, to have the difficult conversations necessary. It's been a tough run. Flint was a difficult visit for him, and I think in some ways it was more difficult than the Detroit visit based on what we've heard, interactions with the pastor. But I say Donald Trump is somebody who is not afraid to engage in the tough conversations, and that's why I support him for president.
Well, Nolan, do you suppose that he's trying to reach out to African-American voters, or is he trying to show white voters that that's what he can do?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I don't think even Donald Trump's crazy enough to think he's going to get a whole lot of African-American votes. I think this is entirely the latter. He's trying to calm some fears amongst mainstream Republicans, particularly, that he's not a racist. He's not everything folks have been saying about him. I don't know if it's going to work or not. It can't hurt. But, I mean, he's got bigger priorities, I would think, and other places he needs to be rather than Detroit and Flint in terms of getting the votes he needs to move off. I mean, this race has been moving up and down, but he hasn't. He's been stuck at 42, 41, and you know he's got to get that number up if he hopes to win this race.
And I love my friend Nolan Finley, but I would disagree to a certain extent. And in this regard, Donald Trump very much wants the world to know that under his administration, everybody will be elevated. And to the extent that that can be communicated by visits to Flint and to Detroit, I think that he will achieve that.
He's got a funny way of showing it.
Go ahead, Ron, dig in a little bit.
He came to an African-American church, and the pastor of the church said, please don't talk about politics, and he went behind her pulpit, and he talked about politics. He went right after Hillary Clinton, who I presume, and he should know, I'm sure he knows most of the people who he was talking to support. And then he left Flint, and he left the state of Michigan, and he slammed her behind her back. I think if you want the African-American vote, you show respect to African-Americans. You talk to African-Americans. I'm sorry, you talk with them, not to them. And if you're going to diss them, at least do it into their face.
Stephen, does he deserve any credit for making some stops that Republican presidential candidates just kind of take a pass on often?
You know, I've said from the beginning, it's not a bad thing to have a presidential candidate during the general election coming to a city talking to black voters. Neither side does that a whole lot because there's not a lot of perceived electoral gain in it, and so, but that, you know, is about as far as the credit extends here. I mean, this is a candidate whose behavior, not just with African Americans, but with Muslim Americans, with Mexicans, with this whole sense of otherism that he really keys on and tries to sort of get support behind, is offensive to black people. It's offensive to Muslims. It's offensive to Mexicans. And so he can come to Detroit as many times as he wants, as long as he's pushing these policies that are about dividing people and pushing people down. I don't think it matters.
Lena, that's a lot of ground to make up then with the groups that you're talking about, trying to suggest that there's an inclusivity built into a Trump presidency.
Sure.
That didn't sound like Stephen's buying that.
I'd refer to the latest polls. Things are changing. People are starting to pay attention. They are listening to
Not among black voters or Muslims or Mexicans.
They are listening to some of the rhetoric, and they are starting to participate in the idea that a Trump presidency could be all-inclusive.
Well, then where's the evening up in this race coming? We've got polls this week showing it pretty much a dead heat, especially if you include the independent candidates.
Hillary Clinton's numbers are the ones that are moving, right? She's either getting the support that she should get, given you know, the candidate she's running against and the other circumstances in the race, or those people are leaving and going to either third-party candidates or saying they're not going to vote, and that's her challenge. Is
you have a big group of voters who find Donald Trump to be deplorable. But they really can't latch on to Hillary Clinton right now, so they're with her for a bit, and then they're going away, and they're going to one of those two camps. Donald, you're exactly right. Donald Trump is going to have to figure a way to grow his vote if he's going to become president. And he's not going to do it if he's still not refusing to say, for example, that the president was born in the United States.
But Ron, I think that's the same challenge for Hillary Clinton because she keeps trying to pound his number lower. And I think his number is where it's going to be.
That's a good
I
point.
think he's got that 41% vote, and they're not going up, they're not going down. She needs to stop her obsession with Trump and start making the case for her own president.
No, we also had another presidential candidate was in town this past week, and that was Gary Johnson, Libertarian candidate. I watched your editorial conversation with him on Facebook Live this week. I thought it was a fascinating conversation, but he cannot seem to make the kind of waves that he needs to become a factor as far as getting himself into the debates, which a lot of people believe might create a game-changing moment, but he still ends up being just a spoiler in some way or another at this point.
Well, I write today
for
that
somebody,
by virtue of making the ballot in all 50 states, which is a rare thing for a third-party candidate, I think he's earned his way onto the debate stage. And I think if he had the chance to be on that debate stage, he would follow sort of a Ross Perot pattern. Ross Perot went into the debate with 7-8% of the vote. He finished up with 19% of the vote on election day. I think you would see perhaps an even stronger support for Gary Johnson if people had a chance to see him and compare him to Trump and Clinton on that debate stage. I think the Debates Commission should put him on there.
I'd like to go back to Trump for a moment, if I may.
Sure.
When I decided to get behind Donald Trump, and I was one of the early supporters, I did not decide to like him because I thought he was so eloquent. I didn't like him because I always thought he said the best things. I respected him because I knew that between the two candidates that he offered the greatest security to this country's future. End of story. End of story.
Well, the polls have shown us that that even people who don't intend to vote for believe that Hillary Clinton is far better on foreign policy. Are you talking about foreign policy? You believe that he's the better answer on foreign policy?
I'm talking about all the way around. Immigration, national security, education, economics. I'm talking about everything.
Let me get back to Gary Johnson. Should he be in the debates?
I don't know. I don't know.
There's a sense that he would take more votes away from Donald Trump.
As co-chair of the Trump campaign, my initial answer would be no. As a friend of Nolan and somebody who listens to all sides, I would be willing. I think Donald Trump's going to do such a great job. It doesn't matter who else besides him and Clinton are on the stage.
If we look at this as a normal voter, one thing we can all agree on is the American public is sick and tired of politics. They hate both parties. Both parties have lost the public's faith. They want an alternative. It's why Donald Trump is doing as good as he is. This is a hard election to be a status quo candidate. It's the right election to be a change candidate. So should we have a third-party candidate in the debates? Heck yes. We need to show Americans that there's alternatives besides these other two parties. Why would we keep them out? I don't understand.
Well, because
I'll tell you why. It's because there's two parties. Well, and those rules are made by the two parties who don't want to have competition.
Well, the rules are made by the debate commission, which are
run by the two parties.
Sort of run.
Sort of a proxy.
They're arms of the party.
It's part of the duopoly that doesn't want to have a competition on their.
If it allows either of them to better articulate their positions, then there might not be a reason against it.
I got to take a quick break. When we come back, so we've had another email hack. This time it was Colin Powell. But do we have any right to read them or spread them around? We'll continue with that. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. The conversation continued right through the break, and before we get to my email quandary, Nolan, any more thoughts on Gary Johnson after his Aleppo comment, not knowing about what Aleppo was, didn't help.
But then it was, as he said at the Economic Club, he knew 100% certain he was going to have Aleppo Day during this campaign and may have another one. But when he elaborated on his views of our foreign entanglements, he was very articulate and very well informed. I was impressed with his answers.
It's really interesting things on immigration. If you want to go back and check their Facebook conversation with that on the Detroit News page. I want to dig into this email situation. Ron, we had an email hack of Colin Powell's Gmail account, I might point out. I think it's a perfect example because there was something for both sides to chew on in what came out of it. But I would not sit down and try to hack Colin Powell's email. I would feel terrible about that as a journalist. And yet, journalists all over the place were taking the goods that were hacked and dissecting them, disseminating them, sending them on, examining them. And I guess I'm wondering if we're entitled to use whatever somebody else manages to hack out of somebody's email, or do we somehow then become fences? Are we just peddling in stolen goods?
That's what journalists do. We take information that people don't want out and then we disseminate it. There was a time not that long ago, 10 or 15 years ago, where we actually were the gatekeepers and we could decide what it was that people heard, and more importantly, we decided what people weren't going to hear. We held back a lot of information, a lot of rumors, this campaign is filled with stuff that we would not have let out before. We don't live in that world anymore. It's not a perfect world. So we can't ignore the fact that it's been hacked. It's all over the internet. So now it's our job to rush in and try to show some context. You and I could pretend, and all our news organizations could pretend it wasn't hacked and it's not out there. But everybody would be reading it anyhow because there's 310 million journalists now.
I got to sleep with myself though at night still, don't I? I mean,
well, the way I sleep with myself is realize it's out there in the public, and my job is to inform the public. So if it's out there, I have to get in the mud and help them contextualize the information that they're reading already. And here's what he's saying about Hillary, and here's what's really the truth, and here's what he's saying about Donald Trump, that we can't pretend that the information's not out there.
Nolan, I think that I can, I suppose you could make the argument on something like the Snowden situation, where you've got a lot of things that were stolen from someplace that contribute to a national conversation about the way our government behaves. Colin Powell's private opinions about Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and almost humorously, profanely, Bill Clinton as well in this release, is that fair game? Is that the same thing?
I mean, that genie's out of the bottle. I mean, where do you draw the line? Where do you decide what's fair game and what's not? As Ron said, it's out there. If we don't report it, we don't control the franchise on information distribution anymore. And so where does it stop? I think, we've surely learned by now that anything you sit down at that computer and write has a potential of being public information. Particularly if you're in a position like that. I think it's fair warning.
I'm still looking for a little bit of comfort here. Steve, it's a little bit, though, like me. I bought a stolen car from somebody, and the police stopped me, and I say, well, look, somebody was going to buy it, so I guess it was going to be me. You, however, I think, believe that to begin with, it's a false belief that what we put in email is private.
If you put something out there in the internet, on the internet, whether it's your private email account or your Facebook page or your dating website, all of these things that people put really, really personal information out there on, I don't know that you have a reasonable expectation that the privacy that someone tells you is intact is indeed going to be respected. I mean,
you see my email as the same thing as my Facebook page.
Yes, absolutely.
Once,
I mean, they
once
are.
It becomes public.
Well, and in a digital sense, they are. You are putting information not just on your computer, but you're sharing it with many other computers. I don't see how you can draw that distinction. Now, I think, you know, part of the problem is that you have institutions that say, well, this is private, right? Your email will not be read. It will not be exposed. I don't think those are reasonable things to assure.
I guess I would disagree. I guess I would dissent in just one area. I think it still should be illegal to hack people's private accounts, and there should be stiff penalties for it. But once it gets out there, I mean, that puts us in a position.
I respectfully could not disagree more with all three of you. I'm in a business. If people were to take material from my business that went public and thousands of pieces of information went public and somebody said, well, it's out there, Ron, so we're just going to use it because it's out there, I would commit my life to having a higher moral standard than that. I think that as journalists, as folks involved in the political story, we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. It is completely unacceptable.
That's a very good point. And to me, my moral standard is to get as close as I possibly can to the truth and help inform the public. So when there's information out there, whether it was seized illegally and somebody could go to jail, or whether I got it from somebody who didn't want it out, but it's important to the public, for whatever reason that it's out there, it's my job to help provide context. To pretend it's not out there is living in a world that we don't live in.
And that's different than industrial espionage. I mean, there are penalties for all this.
Got to get to a break. I could talk about this for a good 3 or 4 hours. Thank
Me too.
you all very much for being here. I really appreciate it. We come back, we're going to talk about our adoption of a Detroit school. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.